Greetings, guten Tag, Talofalava, bonjour, bonjour. This is Dr. Snow Brown, connecting with you all, especially my Snow King Club flock. As promised, I'm about to commence a testimony, my own personal testimony regarding Tofa Heinz Treviranus, whom is the brother of my late dad, Jalino Tangaloa Fangalilo, Walter Herman Treviranus. My dad was born the 14th of March 1945. Tofa Heinz Treviranus, it's self-explanatory, his date of birth. That's already been mentioned in his eulogy or his obituary funeral service on the 5th of December 2025. Now, as you can see, you can all witness, it's a lovely send-off, it's a lovely funeral service. One that depicts a different outlook, definitely celebrates the life of Tofa Heinz Treviranus among family, friends, colleagues, and even strangers. As you can see, that they appear to be all is fair and square, and all is well. So it appears just like it's not a normal ordinary funeral service, as you would expect, except when you go to listen to the testimonies, especially the one that was delivered by Mrs. Atalana Treviranus, or Mr. Heinz Treviranus, sister-in-law, the sister of Mrs. Atalana Treviranus. Then you see the status. She is a reverend's wife, Faletua. And you see the status of the Mosa family, especially, Mrs. Atalana Treviranus she didn't need to deliver a testimony about her own beloved deceased hubby or husband, because her sister done justice. Her sister's testimony was sufficient and is satisfied, as far as I'm concerned, from a meek noble's level. Mrs. Atalana Treviranus' sister, dearly beloved sister's testimony satisfied me immensely, and especially the Samoans and the Samoan language itself, the true Samoan language. I was utterly satisfied and very proud as well to be part Samoa. Well, in my case, I am a part Royal and Pākehā. Anyway, I shall now begin my testimony of Tofa Heinz Treviranus, the late brother of my late dad. You can see from the funeral service that yes, the Treviranus family, they're related to the Yandos. Also, they are part Webster. They're related to the Websters side of my granny's side of the family. Her dad was a full Pākehā, Richard Webster, who, by the way, was also a military man. He was he was part of the armed forces or the military here in New Zealand. There is a picture of great-grandpa Richard Webster and Maria Webster, him standing proudly in his military uniform for the New Zealand Army, or the New Zealand military, armed forces. Anyway, Tofa Heinz Treviranus was my former uncle. He was my uncle. And also the husband to Mrs. Atalana Treviranus, whom I refer to and call Mrs. Yoke and Mr. Yoke. Now, there is nothing, I think, as when I was a young niece growing up, I actually loved my uncle. Had a lot of love and respect for Tofa Heinz Treviranus. Only because I was naive and gullible and innocent growing up. We were disciplined and taught by my so-called dearly beloved mother, Mummy Dearest, Mrs. Buliofata Treviranus Niba, to respect our elders, to respect my dad's brothers and sisters or aunts and uncles. So it was, when I grew up, I did have a lot of respect for my uncles and aunties, especially Tofa Heinz Treviranus. I looked up to him and with admiration, and I almost worshipped the so-called ground he walked on, only because he was more Pākehā looking than some of my other uncles and aunties. But you can see from my dad's side of the family, the Pākehā side, the English, German, Scottish, but also the English side and Scottish comes through. The Yandel, the Webster, that's correct. And then of course the Treviranus with their, and also want to mention that Tofa Heinz Treviranus, well, of course he was, before he passed away, he was very proud of his grandchildren, and especially his son's achievement and his daughter's achievement, all thanks to Tofa Heinz Treviranus. He was a driven man, and he was, and he expected high expectations, excellency. His two children, daughter and her son, to excel in their so-called academic studies, which they did. I would never have thought that Tofa Heinz Treviranus had it in him, that he expected his son, Dr. Ludwig Treviranus, to obtain his doctorate in classical music. Now, classical music, you're talking the kind of subject matter that goes right over most Pacifica people's heads. It isn't something that you would go in, that most, so even half-caste and Samoan students would go to study, although there have been some Samoan very talented, like the three tenors, or the three opera singers. They have achieved, I know. So Ludwig achieved the impossible, achieved what most of our cousins wouldn't have been able to achieve. When you consider funding, that's correct. To do a doctorate in classical music, it requires years of studies, and of course Ludwig took 7 years for him to finally graduate with his doctorate in classical music, from the University of Florida, America. So, and of course, it's a prestigious achievement. It is a very prestigious qualification. But like I said, Tofa Heinz Treviranus was always the one in the family that wanted, to achieve the impossible. The sort of achievements that is difficult, that requires a lot of dedication, years of studies to obtain. And of course, Mrs. Atalana Treviranus was privileged enough to get her master's degree under the supervision and the guidance of Professor Tofa Heinz Treviranus, this great. And his daughter is the first one among all the cousins to obtain a Bachelor of Arts in speech therapist. Now again, there is no other speech therapist in the family. There is no other Dr. Ludwig Treviranus or another doctorate in classical music in the family. So these achievements, I've got to take my hat off and salute Tofa Heinz Treviranus for these achievements. Because it takes years of dedication, years of not resilience, the word, but stamina and endurance, and grit. And I'm not talking about biscuits or what do you call that? What's that? Or cinnamon rolls. I'm talking about real grit. And all the armed forces, men and women of the armed forces, I salute you all for being the Samoan, especially the Toa Samoa, for having the courage and the boldness, the audacity to go and and serve in the armed forces. Even itself, the program, the entrance program, the exercises. I mean, Diamond Art knows the type of dedication and the aptitude, your attitude, everything. You've got to have principles. You have got to be a real tour. To put yourself through the training, and then graduation, and then going on deployment, peacekeeping. All of that requires real energy. Grit is the word. Now, Tofa Heinz Treviranus, he's a self-made man. And when he sets his mind to doing something, he always completes it. But you see, Tofa Heinz Treviranus was the kind of Pākehā, and I would say the kind of Palangi, that was not only driven, he was a man that was just unstoppable. Whatever Tofa ole sunga ia, o Tofa Heinz Treviranus, sunga, but possibly the kind of attitude that in the end was his downfall. That's great. Tofa Heinz Treviranus, back in those days in the islands, we only spent 7 years in Samoa before we immigrated to New Zealand on the 17th of December 1982. We spent 3 years, or I and my mum, my beloved my mum dearest, and one of my other siblings spent 3 years in the Philippines before we went back to Samoa, and then we immigrated to New Zealand. But we have spent about going on 43 years now in New Zealand, in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So I don't consider myself a full Samoan, and not even Samoa. I grew up in this country. I know more about what goes on in my world and what goes on in the Apartheid Treaty Partnership, especially the Police Intelligence Unit, and having lived in the wilderness among the wolves and the weeds at my current address, got to learn, I got to understand. Probably the saddest thing about Tofa, Heinz Treviranus, is that he had an obsession, a compulsive obsession, just like the rest of his brothers and sisters. They just seemed to like studying, and I mean studying. This one, the eldest of the eldest, Elmarilia Eileen Treviranus, brackets, speech marks, Dr. Snow Brown. And boy, did Tofa, Heinz Treviranus, had an obsession to study this one. And I mean, I remember when I started my university studies back in 1993, and then I graduated at the end of 1995. I didn't even know that Tofa Heinz Treviranus had a compulsive sickness called erythemania. He was obsessed. He had a compulsive possessiveness and obsession to know how my studies, how I was faring at the university. What was I doing there? How was I doing with my so-called studies? Now, this information is normally private, but it looks like Mrs. Atalana Treviranus and Mr. Tofa Heinz Treviranus had been speaking to third parties, and I mean to the lecturers directly, who were my teachers at the university, and even went as far as paid money to other students at the university to stalk or to harass, to make it difficult for me to study at the university, because they had known my private information. Private, I mean the most private information. So they could misuse and abuse that information to stalk me, harass me at the university, or to intimidate me while I was trying to do my studies. Make it harder for me to pass my studies. I didn't even know that Tofa Heinz Treviranus and Mrs. Atalana Treviranus were associates of the Police Intelligence Unit, or brackets, National Intelligence Center. I didn't even know that they were associates of a criminal organization, specifically the mob clan, which is the KKK and MMB that I have been preaching about. I had no idea going to university that my evil rallies, in terms of Tofa Heinz Treviranus especially, and his Mrs. Atalana Treviranus, we're going to know more about my studies at the university than anybody else in the family. That's what I'm talking about, that Tofa Heinz Treviranus had an obsession, had a compulsive obsession to know about everybody else's business, especially when it came to the performances or the studies of all the cousins. I guess he was, I'm not sure what kind of empire he was aiming at, whether he was building one. I actually think he was building an empire. It's cool. He wanted to be the king of the kingpins. And boy, was he so intelligent. And I mean, really intelligent. It's just as well he looked Pākehā. Because I don't think a lot of the things, a lot of the ideas that he was able to somehow bring to the fore of the minds of those that were influential, powerful people. The people that were like the police commissioner, ministers of the crown, the prime minister, very powerful elites. I don't think he would have been able to persuade them a lot and even influence, become part of the city council if he didn't look Pākehā. I don't think a lot of the ideas that he would have suggested would have had to come through the authority of the arsehole, or the anal authority. That's correct. So a lot of so-called brilliant ideas that Tofa Heinz Treviranus would have used or to manipulate people and to brainwash people to make them believe that that he was doctor, professor. He was Professor Tofa Heinz Treviranus. He knew it all. Were other people's ideas. But you see, if he was friends with crazy people, the maniacs, if he was friends with powerful elites that were KK associates and MB associates, then I'm afraid that the outlaw side of things, side of the wrong end of the fence or the wrong end of the stick, would have gotten to him. And at the end of the day, he earned the mark of the beast. He was so good at camouflaging, and I mean really good at manipulating people, controlling people, getting people to do things without him twisting their arms or without them. But you see, he used money to his advantage. And I mean, money was his power. That's correct. He didn't have the kind of power or authority that I had. But, Tofa Heinz Treviranus, he was a hard worker, all right. But he certainly knew how to milk the system and milk the officials and even milk the elites from the very top right down to hitchhikers. He loved picking up people. I think that Tofa Heinz Treviranus, if anything he didn't do it for God's glory or for the glory of, no, he did it for his glory. It was all to glorify his so-called, his empire. He built an empire, all right. He certainly was able to manipulate everybody. But like I said, if he didn't look Pākehā, and if he didn't have money on his side, he probably would have been ignored a lot. If there was one thing that Tofa Heinz Treviranus didn't like, is that he didn't like to be ignored by people, especially important people, especially people from the academic world, and anybody that was a doctor. Anybody, and I'm talking about, say for example, Dr. Pavate or Dr. Wickham, is correct. He wouldn't have liked it at all if any important person from the system ignored his authority and even denied his authority And yet he did a lot of this when it came to me. It's only because in Mr. Tofa Heinz Treviranus' eyes, I could only be a coconut. I could only be a coconut. I could only be, like she is a full Samoan. There is no Baka side in her. Not when she looks that way. Back in those days, I still remember, in the islands, one day, see, Tofa Heinz Treviranus didn't know that I was, he accepted that I was his niece, that's correct. But one day, I got to meet this Balangi. That bar that my granddad introduced me to. Oh, this is Heinz. That's right. So this is this is Walter's eldest daughter. Oh, there she is. That's great. And when I met my uncle, he looked very Baka. He didn't intimidate me at all. But I got the impression that he felt intimidated. Standing next to the niece that is actually the most favored grandchild of all the grandchildren, that's correct. And but I sensed there was a little bit of green-eyed monster. There's a little bit of jealousy there. Because he always said that he was favored more than all the other, than his other siblings, brothers and sisters. That's what Tofa Heinz Treviranus thinks. He thinks that he was favored more by his own late dad. When in actual fact, if he, I mean, he loves studying me, all right. If he knew his dad and his mum really well, he would know better that if a grandchild middle name is Eileen, which is my granny's so-called first name, well, then you know who's favored. That's correct. Which grandchild is favored more? That's correct. He would have been really jealous of that. So all these years, I guess Tofa Heinz Treviranus was in competition with somebody. Himself. That's correct. It's all about himself and his achievements. It's all me, me, me. That's great. Look what I have achieved. Look what I've done. I've done the impossible. Yeah, you've done the impossible, but with whose money? Yeah. That's all Mama Lucy's money. That's great. That's all your daddy's money. Through Mama Lucy. That's great. The very Dr. Lucy Imgard Treviranus Nieschäfer paid for his schooling. So military. He went to a military school in Germany, I believe, right about in the 1970s. That's correct, in Germany. And the old lady, of course, paid for it. He paid for all his schooling in the military school. I saw pictures of Tofa Heinz Treviranus, and he looked like he fit in all right, looking the way that he did. He certainly knew how to fool. That's great. The Germans. But of course, when you look when you look the part, that's great. You get respected. You get accepted. And you get empowered. I understand what it's like to be empowered by a Pākehā, or by a white person, or by somebody that is more privileged than most individuals. And sadly, the obsession with the studying of me. You see, Tofa Heinz Treviranus, I think the fact that he was already envious back in the islands, he had an obsession. He had something to do with that. He had this demon that followed him everywhere, that wanted to control other, children in the family, other nieces and nephews, other grandchildren. This Palangi is really sick. This is correct. That he knew everybody's business. When a lot of families don't allow that kind of control and don't allow that kind of scrutiny, that kind of censorship, where you almost know what people wear, what people do at home, what people say. And that's what's been happening there at the address that I lived for the last 13 years. And you can see from my preaching set, Tofa Heinz Treviranus was stalking, is a serial, I'll say this, not only is he a serial rapist, he is a serial stalker, he's a sexual predator. He is also a very sick man. He's a very sick man when it comes to controlling people in the family, in the Treviranus clan. That is correct, and that's what he has been doing throughout my tenancy. And he is such a great manipulator and so good with his words and his hands and his mouth and his actions that it's amazing how he managed to get all his other siblings, brothers and sisters, to be on his side, to get me control. He was so powerful, he was able to manipulate the elites and got everybody controlled. That's correct. Except when it came to me, I was the one that he could not handle. I was the one person in the entire family that he wanted to make sure that I would be denied a lot of my privileges and be controlled. Tofa Heinz Treviranus is a demon. He's a sick demon. He's a serial rapist. You would not believe it. But he actually liked violence in the most psychotic way. He actually liked violence against women and children. This obsession and he likes to make fun. That's the Nazi. That's the Hun way of doing things. And Tofa Heinz Treviranus had an obsession with me. And he conspired with my evil rallies, with my cousin and her family, even her sick parents. Afatia Baker, that entire family is part of the Mongol Mob Association. They've had years. The same with the Webster family. They are all sick with violence, especially when it comes to raping women and children. Tofa Heinz Treviranus has been doing just that to Mrs. Atalana Treviranus. It's so sad to stand here and say that Tofa Heinz Treviranus, with the rest of his brothers and sisters, especially his brothers, and Afatia Baker and their family, are guilty of committing a heinous crime, rape crime, against my person and against my family, via a police officer, via a member of a sworn police officer that is part of the New Zealand Police Force. That's been covered up, that has been covered up, aided and abetted. And Tofa Heinz Treviranus and Mrs. Atalana Treviranus, his missus, always got her way. They are all sick with adultery, sick with pedophilia, and sick with incest especially. In fact, it was more the incest in the family and the adultery that got me down to. because they were all my dad's brothers and even sisters are sick with incest and adultery and adultery. I think they became sick with pedophilia when they became associates of the criminal organization, when they became part of the police intelligence unit. So sadly, I have to say that ole ainga o kama, soriku and they are all guilty of conspiring to commit the rape crime against a police officer, against my mona, guilty of treasons. So that's why the so-called, this testimony, the celebrated life of Tofa Heinz Treviranus, those are all lies. Those are all lies. That is not the real Tofa Heinz Treviranus. He's a monster. He's a monster. And a real outlaw and a real ratbag. Should have been chucked. Should have chucked his skinny white ass to Skareed. Should have been chucked years ago. Should have been locked up in jailbird in a straitjacket, as well as, given the straitjacket at the same time and chucked down there in the hole, because that's where he belonged. He belonged in the pit. He sold everything. He used Jesus. He used his Father. He used God and the Christians for what he could achieve, It was all about his glorification. It was all about his empire. It was all about his Bākea friends. Whatever, if there was, the people that were more important, Tofa Heinz Treviranus, were his stupid, sick Bākea friends, the Skareed. And their opinions were more important. And even their authority were more important. And he made sure that their authorities and their opinions and perspectives were upheld. By what? By using the police intelligence unit and even using the coconuts that were whoremongers to control and dictate to me and harm me and curse me. He even used the people of Aotearoa, the Kaumatua, the local Maoris, to dictate to me and control my family. I remember very well the funeral service of my dad. It was probably the saddest day for my mummy dearest, because whatever agreements she had made with the elites and with Tofa Heinz Treviranus and with the rest of the family, mummy dearest had no choice but to comply. Otherwise, she would have been knocked off, and she would have been taught a lesson. And she probably would have received a good beating, or she probably would have been raped by the reinforcers. But I remember my dad's funeral service. My so-called asylum seeker application, right, there's proof. Those are all the Solikula Fongo from the Treviranus clan. And the head of the clan, of the Treviranus clan, is Tofa Heinz Treviranus. He is the instigator, the initiator. He's the boss of the Treviranus family. That's correct. And it's only because he was really smart. And that he looked Bākea. He understood the Bākea psyche. He understood the white man's psyche. He even understood the dumb Samoans' psyche. He was so intelligent, that's correct. He could manipulate anybody. He could turn anybody against their own families and even against their own friends. He knows what to say. To get you buried. To get you buried. That's correct. I, he, can you imagine if he was a professor? So somebody like Dan Maldy, Dr. Dan Maldy, who's Dr. Slug the Slutty, that's correct. That is somebody that would have taught Tofa, Professor Tofa Heinz Treviranus, is correct. And they would have been, friends. So all Dr. Wickham, Dr. Pavate knows Mrs. Atalana Treviranus. Now, I'm warning anybody out there in the community, and I'm talking about the people that work in the system. Don't be fooled by people like Mrs. Atalana Treviranus, by people like Tofa Heinz Treviranus, because they only use people for what they can get. And they love playing mind games. The kind of mind games where you're going to be able to control somebody. And sometimes, a lot of the time, Tofa Heinz Treviranus is so good at daring games. I dare you. I dare you to do this. I dare you to push the boundaries. I dare you to have sex with Richard Chambers or Andrew Costa. And, the sad thing about Mrs. Atalana Treviranus, the wife of Tofa Heinz Treviranus, even she had to make a lot of sacrifices all these years. She was raped by a lot of his friends. A lot of the Pakeas that were friends with Tofa Heinz Treviranus, they raped the police officers, police commissioners. They would have raped Mrs. Atalana Treviranus. And they didn't care. Because she just went along with it. And she got used to it. That's correct. So that's why she couldn't deliver a testimony. Because her husband was a monster.